Documents, Chris.
I think we're good to go.
It's almost there. Hold on a second.
Live stream.
Yes.
Okay, so good evening to the March 31st, 2022 Governance and Policy Committee meeting. I'm calling the meeting to order at 6:02. We'll start with introductions. I'm Chris Vallon. I'm chairing this committee and I'm a board member.
Tracy Maris, President, Board of Education.
Ashley Pineda, Board Trustee, parent of two.
And Dr. Iverson, Superintendent of Schools.
Ivy.
Krause, Superintendent Secretary.
And Luke.
And I'm Luke Johnson. I am with SW BOCES, and I'm hosting this meeting.
Okay, thank you all and welcome. Sorry, I'm just gonna dive in here. Our last committee meeting was on February 10th, and at that meeting we had a number of recommendations that were put to the board. So I'm just going to quickly pull up those minutes. Okay, share screen so that we can. Okay. Of course, I have multiple tabs open.
I'm looking at a Google form.
Yep.
I mean, a Google Doc, yeah.
What's this one?
It says March 31st. Oh. Okay.
This is the minutes from February 10th that I'd like to take a look at and amend if needed. I will, actually, I'm not going to read that. Well, I'll do the bold things out loud for transcription purposes. At the meeting, we approved the minutes from the January 13th meeting. We discussed policy 2210 on committees, confirming that in-person attendance, live streaming, or allowing the public to log directly into Zoom is required for all board committee meetings. We made a recommendation to the full board that because such a meeting a planning meeting for committees may constitute a subcommittee, and to take as strict an interpretation as possible to avoid violating open meetings law, that 3 committee trustees cannot meet to discuss committee business without other public committee members. Okay, and then some background information on that was included in the minutes. Another recommendation from that meeting was that committee meetings could continue to take place virtually while the New York State open meetings law permits us to do so due to COVID adjustments. We also recommended that once we are required to be in person, we should look at ways to record at least some committee meetings with the idea of continuing community engagement. That is on our agenda for this evening. We looked at our meeting evaluation form. We recommended that we continue to use both hard copies and PDF fillable versions so that meeting participants can use what best suits them. And we issued a reminder to all board meeting participants to return the evaluation form to the district clerk by the next day so that they could be compiled. Okay, and we confirmed that administrators at the meeting would also be asked to give feedback on our meeting effectiveness. We discussed our board retreat, which was scheduled for March 26th. We outlined a schedule for the day, which would include a few hours of open session, strategic plan work with our consultant, McCormick, and that would be considered a special meeting of the board and that the public would be invited to attend. That did happen, and some public members did come physically, as well as a recording was made by one of our board members, and that has since been posted to YouTube. Then we entered a closed session for some team building exercises, and we referred other items about the retreat back to the full board for discussion. Okay. We discussed meeting structure for presentations, and we recommended that we would continue our meeting structure for building presentations as it is currently done after getting feedback from building administrators. We said that committee reports could cover departmental information and that more detail can be sought via the YouTube playback and/or slides posted to the department or committee website pages. and that the assistant superintendent presentations would be included as part of their 10-minute report unless it was an extra special presentation. We recommended that the CEC committee would solicit feedback on partnering with school-related organizations for curricular nights by department to help inform the community of what's going on in our district. Okay. We took a look at our new policy 1130 on ex officio student members. We clarified some language in the policy regarding the grade level of candidates for election. We sought volunteers from the board to meet with student government if they so desired. We sought a consensus from the board to pursue an alternate method of selection for this partial year that we have remaining. That has been done. Our ex officio student member will hopefully be joining us for her first meeting next Tuesday, April 5th. Her name is Ann Panus. Congratulations, Ms. Panus, and we look forward to meeting you. All right. We also discussed our public participation statement. We sought legal advice on whether a speaker during public comments needed to state their address or simply listed on the request to speak form. And we also recommended that additional contact information be added to the request to speak form, specifically an email address. We discussed policy 5661 wellness and recommended that the Education and Wellness Committee should evaluate that policy and make a recommendation themselves as to whether to split into two separate committees, excuse me, Education Committee and Wellness Committee, or to incorporate the requirements of this policy into their committee work. That is still a pending issue, which we'll be discussing again tonight. And finally, we formalized our recommendation to create a separate email account for FOIL requests. And those are the minutes from the February meeting. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes as written?
So moved.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
I had a question.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I was waiting. So my question is, I don't remember us saying that committee, the 3 board members could not meet for committee planning. Was that the discussion we had with the full board, or is that coming out of our committee? I just don't recall it.
If you're referring to this point here, point B, that recommendation came after we sought advice from our legal advisors and referring to the open meeting law specifically, which is quoted more specifically here in these minutes.
But is that for all committees? I remember a discussion about that around for all committees, okay, but not district committees.
This is for
I'm inverting them.
District committees, which include public members.
Okay, so can we specify that in here?
Let's see, recommended because meeting can. Okay.
Because that wouldn't qualify for a board committee, right? I think you have it at the top there, but not in this specific thing.
That was regarding the live streaming or not at the top there. Can 3 committee, because such a meeting may constitute a subcommittee, to take a strict interpretation. Yes, we can. Ivy, sorry. Ivy, yes.
You may want to say, can 3 district committee trustees or 3 trustees serving on district committees meet without other public committee members? Leave it at the question.
Can say that one more time?
You can say, can 3 trustees serving on a district committee meet without other public committee members? That way the actual committee that you're referring to is listed in your question.
Okay. Tracy, does that answer your concern?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Highlight this for No? Okay. Are there any further adjustments to the minutes?
So I rescind my motion because now we got to do it as amended.
Sorry.
Okay.
Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Motion carries. Okay, great. Let's close this tab. Okay. I'll adjust these participants later. Okay, so Ms. Krause is here because we've all been discussing at various times our policy review process. So let me pull up that fantastic diagram she made. And Ivy, at this point, do you just want to give us a summary again of how the process currently works? And then we'll open it up for questions and move into the discussion on if we want to make changes or not.
Certainly. So this particular process was requested by the board pre-COVID, where a draft policy that comes in from Erie One, that is the service that the district uses. When it comes in, initially it was going to the board, and then the board would determine, does it go to administrators first or the attorney first? The board had since decided, after we had developed the process, the board changed the process to be that draft policies that come in would be referred to administration for their review, the attorney for their review, and then once it was vetted by both, then it would be presented to the board. The board would review it. If they had additional questions, it would go back to admin and the school attorney. If the board was satisfied with the language, then it would be presented at a regular meeting for formal adoption at the following regular meeting. So if you were presenting at the March regular meeting, then it would be for adoption at the April regular meeting.
Okay, so just to clarify here, you have two arrows that it goes after, excuse me, the markups are after you send it to the lawyers, that it goes back both to admin and to the board simultaneously? Because I thought you just said that you sent it to, did I mishear? No,
it can go in one of two ways. So the district clerk marks up the policy with the administrative changes, if any, and then sends it to the attorney for their review. So the district clerk, if the attorney provides more changes, then it would be updated again, and then sent to administrators, to the admins. So all the back and forth between attorney and admin, that's all vetted first. Okay. And then once admin and attorney are in agreement with wording and language, and they're both satisfied, then it gets presented to the board for a review during a work session. The reason I have the two arrows is, the first one is, if the attorney has any changes, then I incorporate the changes, or the district clerk incorporates the changes, and then it gets sent to the administration for a final review. Then after that, it goes, it'll go to the board. Or if the attorney has no changes, then it goes straight to the board for review.
Okay. Super. Any questions so far?
Can we add, like a flow chart language to this? So where there's the fork in the road, it would say changes, and then yes would be district clerk, and then no would be the second one.
Oh, certainly, that could be done. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
I don't have any questions because I was a part of this flow chart, so I was there and fully involved in it. But that's a great suggestion, Ashley.
Okay. So then if you could also then, Ivy, so we get draft policies from Erie One, both for new policies and for any changes to existing policies, and they would follow this process, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And are there any other services that Erie One provides to us around policies?
They do have a administrative regulation service.
And that's, I mean, and we pay for that already. That's already in the services that we receive? Or
Yes.
Is that okay.
Can you clarify, Trustee Valley, what services are you thinking about that they might offer?
Well, first I wanted to get clarification on from Ivy what exactly the admin services.
Oh, okay.
entail. So could you just clarify a little bit about what those additional pieces?
Oh, so certainly. I'm sorry. So they offer the policy service where they submit. There are two levels. The district has the highest service level of service. So they provide monthly and quarterly updates, and then there's for the administrator side, there is a service for providing templates for any regulations. So not every policy needs a regulation or would have a regulation. And not every procedure / regulation would necessarily be a policy that is in place by the board. It could be something set up because of a federal requirement that you don't have a corresponding policy that you need to have.
And when you say regulations or procedures, can you give an example just so I can make that a concrete idea in my head? Is that, for example, if we have a policy on
yeah, give me a policy.
What's a simple one?
Let's use weapons on the campus as an example.
I'm sorry?
Weapons on the campus.
Okay, so the board develops a policy. They formally adopt a policy that says there are no weapons on campus. If there's a corresponding regulation, it would be a superintendent's regulation or a superintendent's procedure. The board, basically, once you set up a policy, then it's the superintendent that is to carry it out the way the board intends. So the procedure could be, we're going to put signs, no weapons allowed. If someone does bring a weapon, XYZ will be the process that will be followed to remove the weapon or to address the person that brought it in. So it's to carry out the intent of the board policy. And again, not every policy really needs a regulation. It all depends on what the policy is.
So it basically boils it down to policy level that we set here in the committee and propose to the full board after it goes through admin and legal review, and operational issues on how to enact the policy, which is the admin. So what Erie 1 provides to admin is suggestions, right? Ways to operationalize that. Is that correct?
Yes, because just like a policy, they're going to provide a generic policy that could address a city school district, a BOCES. And the same thing with the regulation, it will address a BOCES. It's all encompassing. So you have to tailor it to make it what the district does or what you want the district to do. And the other caveat is the board adopts policy. The superintendent's regulations / procedures are not subject to board approval.
So I'm just trying to avoid the word regulations, because when you say that, I think education law, which is kind of where the policies are derived from. I think the legal source of all of this, but regulations, the way you're using it, is more procedures and protocols, or am I?
Well, it's the same when you're thinking of the state. So you have the New York State Education Department laws, the various sections, Title II, Title I, Section 2305, and then you have corresponding regulations that are promulgated by the Commissioner of Education. So it's the same concept. You are the legislative body for the Greenburgh Central School District, and you have Dr. Iverson as your chief executive officer, who would develop regulations to address the policies that you're creating.
But again, when you say regulations, it's more, again, an operational procedure rather than.
The terms are used interchangeably. So okay. you will see they're called administrative regulations. You can also call them procedures, but the terms are used interchangeably.
Right. Okay. But the suggestions from Mary One BOCES aren't necessarily binding as long as they meet the policy, which is based on the laws, correct?
Yeah, none of the
has some room to tailor it to our district is where I guess I want to get an understanding.
Yes, because none of their policies, none of their templates are binding unless the board approves it, and or the superintendent decides to use whatever suggested language, because they could be referring to one particular policy which speaks to having like sixth grade housed at various buildings. The Greenburgh works on the Princeton plan, so you only have sixth grade is housed in one building. So a policy referencing grades in multiple buildings wouldn't apply to the district. Similarly to regulations, if it's addressing something done by BOCES, because BOCES acts a little differently, city school districts run a little differently, you would remove that language. You wouldn't keep it in there because Erie 1 provided it. You would tailor it to meet what Greenburgh does or what you want Greenburgh to do.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Are there questions from anyone else? Any comments?
I'm good.
Okay, so just to move in a little further, the reason this is coming up again is because, just for everyone's knowledge, because I don't remember who I've been emailing and since the public's also watching. So we get these updates from Mary One BOCES on changes that have been either required by legal changes in education law or state law or whatever, or new policies that have been created. And since COVID began, we've been in a holding pattern because we had other priorities. And then we've had a lot of changes in the district. So that was all put on the table, and we're trying to restart that queue, that backlog of policy changes that have come through. And at the same time, we're starting to look at, we have these changes that are happening, but we also have a new administration, and there may be new priorities or changes that we might want to make to align with our strategic plan as it's developed. So these are what's in the queue, what may happen soon, and simultaneously, we've got some of us that are actively looking at policies that are a current issue. For example, the wellness that I referred to earlier. So, so this week, Ivy and I had spoken a few months ago as far as how to restart this so it's not overwhelming staff and how to do it in a somewhat orderly way. I had thought that at some point we'd look at this as a committee and make a decision on how to prioritize that. And now, because everyone's wanting to look at policies, it's time for us to actually have this discussion. So where do we go from here? There's a backlog of, let's call it 32 to 40 policies that have changed since March or February 2020. Those are
Valen, is that the image in your
the
image
yes.
That's there? Yeah, okay.
I'm not going to pull that up because I'm not clear on whether that's public. I'm also going to, for the next meeting, have that in a spreadsheet that we can toggle through, but I didn't have time to get that ready for tonight. So the list that you see in the shared drive is in addition to the list I'd shared with you previously of things that are already in the queue for administrative review and legal review. I know Ivy has looked at the ones that are in the administrative queue and found that there are no additional changes. So they're still sitting there. The ones in the legal queue, Ivy, correct me if I'm wrong, but you said that you had not gone back to look at those yet to see if they needed more adjustments before moving ahead in that queue.
There's currently, I believe there are three
Mhm.
that are there, 3 or 4, no more than 4.
Yeah, very
that I just had to go back because that was in process right at the shutdown.
right.
And then, so I have to go back to see what the status of those are.
Mm-hmm. So I know we're not going to make any decisions tonight, but I wanted to clarify the process so that we can start identifying priorities. I know I have some things in the back of my head, but as far as clarifying the process, Dr. Iverson, other committee members, I don't know if you have a thought on how we set those priorities or if we want to change anything in this process. The way this flow chart is put here is how it is pushed through the system, but as I alluded to a minute ago, we also have some trustees pulling policy changes through. I've pulled wellness out of the hat and started that moving. The CEC committee has identified 5 policies that they want to start pulling through. So what I want to avoid is that our support staff is suddenly getting requests from 5 different areas and to set some sort of structure to this, some order to this. So I welcome now comments on how we can manage this process. So it's not overwhelming for anyone.
Sure. So I'll chime in here. So working in reverse, your last question was about board members requesting policy updates, et cetera. So that is accounted for in this process. That's that first box. It says BOCES, admins, BOE members, or school attorney. So it would just follow the same process that we already have delineated, just that in this case, the BOE member is the one requesting the update, right? But it would still follow the same process. And when we went through this last time, we actually made sure we added that because there was some ambiguity there previous to that. In terms of the first question, which is priority, in my opinion, priority should be whatever's being required by law. Those are the policies that should be in first and updated because those are the ones that most likely are going to get us into an issue if they're not updated, right? And then after we go through those, then I would focus on anything else that would be relating to critical issues such as safety or anything like that. I presume most of the ones that are being changed by law are the same category though. So I think if we focus on the legal ones, get those out of the hopper and done, then we can have a little more time to go through the rest and make sure that they're fully what we're looking for.
Well, let me clarify what you're saying when you say required by law. I mean, theoretically, everything coming from Erie 1 BOCES. Yes, Ivy, thank you.
I could speak to what Trustee Pineda is saying. So there are certain policies that state law and or federal law requires the board to have in writing. Others are not required. You're not required to have a policy on a particular item because you have to follow state law and or federal law. But there are certain ones that the board is required to have in place in writing. So I understand what Trustee Pineda was asking, and I can certainly take a look at the list that we have so far and let you know how many are required.
Thank you.
So just for fun, so this is am I logged in here? Or is this me as a public? No, here I am as a public person. So just for fun, let's pull up community relations and let's just go to a random boop. Okay, we stopped here. So when you say required by law, are you saying ones that have legal references?
No, because most of the policies are going to refer to a section of law that that authorizes the school board, the school district to provide this, this accommodation or service. There are some policies, or I should say, there are some state laws, federal laws that say you must put in writing, you must establish a policy on XYZ. Others you do not. So for instance, duties of the internal auditor, that may not be a policy you have to have. Clearly in state law, you'll find what the duties of an internal auditor should be. You don't necessarily have to create your own policy. to spell it out, but you can. Or it could be that duties of the internal auditor is something that the state says, yes, you must have a written policy regarding this this mandate that you have to have in place.
Okay. And that sounds like that might be different than the list of required policies that I know Erie 1 provides a list of required policies, or is that the same?
Those, yes. So when you look at the list of required policies, I think there might be 15 or 20. I don't recall how many are on that list, but you clearly have many more policies than what is required by law.
Okay.
So I can compare, I can go back and see which are required, and let you know how many in the queue fall under that category.
I don't want to presume to be setting your workload though. So Dr. Iverson, I don't know if you had any thoughts around what we're saying so far. Because again, I don't want to set your secretary's tasks.
No, this process is similar in a lot of states, so I agree with the flow. This is how it's revisions and changes and updates are made to policy. So we would follow this. I think I would go with Ivy and see the list. I know we do have a policy on diversity, equity, I think, and inclusion. I may not have all the words there. I don't know the number. I know that is every district is required to have one. That may be one, I'm sure, on this list that probably needs to be updated with the climate we're in right now, coming out of COVID or just pre-COVID and during COVID. So I would begin with that list, and from that list, even prioritize which are the first to do and get all of those done first, knowing that there are other policies that we want to look at, like you said, Trustee Valley, on the Committee for Communication and Engagement. We have about 6 policies that we want to look at as well. And so I think that's just the place to begin. Assure that we are following the law and the requirements that come from the state around policies being updated, do those, and then touch upon the ones that are then priorities as it aligns with our focus. Our wellness is an issue. It's a concern, just an area we're working on in terms of seeing where it fits, which committee even handles that, and to go from there.
Because I had also thought, I know, I had identified policies related to our school safety plan, and this is all earlier this year, and policies related to our code of conduct, Project Save. And I know that's something your administration is going to start working on over the next several months, probably. But I feel like, we can all name a whole bunch of policies. I don't know if, you referenced the Wellness Committee, the CEC Committee. If we know that there's a bucket, and I'm saying school safety plan, which kind of goes back to what Ashley was saying, I don't know if we get the legal list in the queue and the queue from Ivy and look at all those. And then if we know that CEC is identifying these and I'm mentioning this and Ashley's mentioning that, if we then each pick one, I don't know how to, and submit them to you for you to like set the final priority level. I'm just throwing this out here. Again, just so we're not all suddenly emailing Joya and Ivy. Yes, Ashley.
So from prior experience, I will tell you, policies take a while to get revised. Even with a policy that we're making a one-word change to, for it to go through the process of admin checking it, and it's not just one person in admin. Typically, it's a few folks in admin, and the superintendent's double checking, make sure she's comfortable with it. Then it's going to the attorneys, and they're going through double checking everything. So by the time it goes through that whole process, it takes a while. So I would suggest that the committees that are reviewing policies go ahead and be free to go ahead and come up with their revisions and their suggestions. but that we put that into a queue behind the legally required ones, get all the legally required ones out of the way. And then once we've gotten through that bulk, we can ask the superintendent and her team to then analyze the list that's left and figure out of those, which are the priority. Because I think it's going to take longer than we think it is, especially with the backlog, if I heard correctly, of about 40 policies. That's
great. Agreed. And if you notice, going back to that flow chart, and Ivy, you'll comment, when it says here that the district clerk marks up the existing policy, Ms. Ponicello is working on wellness right now. It is a very long policy, and it is, Ivy, you can know this better than anyone, it's very time consuming. So depending on the policy that gets in that queue, this is where a lot of, if that's what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid of that we all submit multiple things to get marked up, and it's just a queue in a different place, overwhelming our staff. So maybe we need to create that queue here. Is that what you're saying? I'm probably restating what you said, Ashley, but I need to drill it into my brain. If we create that queue here and submit it to Dr. Iverson before it even gets to the markup phase. Okay.
Correct.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
So the second step where it says district clerk marks up existing policy to show changes. If the changes, God bless you, if the changes are made by the committee, for example, why would the district clerk have to spend time marking it up?
Typically, from what I've seen, Trustee Mayers, is the committee will go ahead and make their recommendation as to what the policy is supposed to look like in their view, not necessarily including tracking changes and all that kind of stuff. To your point, we could eliminate that step if we set up track changes, but that is if we get one from a committee, versus if we get something from everyone BOCES. I don't recall seeing every single policy having a clearly delineated cross out. I think when I've seen those, it's actually been most likely from our attorneys or from central admin or the district clerk in that point, haven't done the redlining and calling it out for us. So I think that's where you get into that place. From a committee, from our group, just reviewing something, yeah, we could just turn on track changes and not accept the changes, and that'll cut down that step. But I think the bulk of the policies are from a different source at this point.
Right. So Trustee Valley, when you're talking about us creating a different queue or committees, I know, for example, I was very confused about listening to another committee talk about multiple different policies that they wanted to try to pull from. I wasn't sure if the changes would be to the policy, if there was going to be some standards created, but I'm thinking that that's where this came from. So if there were policies that a particular committee looked at, said this isn't working, we may need to make some changes, they would essentially be turning on, as you said, Trustee Pineda, track changes, making those, I guess, suggestions or corrections, and then I would think it would jump to administration for review. And then if the administration agrees with it, then it would get over to the attorney for review to make sure that their suggested track changes would be okay. But I'm not sure if that would work. I guess I would need to ask Ivy. There's a different page on here now.
I'm gonna use an example here. So
okay.
The committee I think you're referring to, one of the ones that they named was this policy 6411, use of email in the district. Oh yeah, I even added in CEC wants to look at this. That is actually one of the ones that had that was in process when everything was stopped for COVID. So it's actually already higher up in the queue and ready for admin and legal to, I forget who exactly, admin or legal, to look at it. So theoretically, they could, I don't even know if they have the most updated policy because it's in the process of change. It might not be, it's not in our policy manual. Ivy, interrupt me at any point if I'm saying something wrong, please. So they may need to be referred to the one that's in the queue if they're going to look at it to see if it's still applicable or suggest another change. And if they do, for example, want to make a change to this, then it will need to go back. If it's already been to legal, if it's already been through admin and needs to go and is waiting for legal, then it will need to go back to admin and go through that part of the process again. I don't know if I'm answering your question. So that's just an example of one that's already further along in the process. If another one that they wanted to look at, or let's say something I wanted to look at, let's just pick one here from safety, fire and emergency drills. You know, it was last looked at in 2017. If I don't, you know, if the safety and technology committee, for example, doesn't, you know, thinks the policy looks great and there's been no update, if it's not on the Erie 1 list of things that have been changed recently, which I haven't verified yet because I haven't consolidated these lists yet. Actually, there may have been a change. So then it just sits and never gets through the process because it looks like neither the committee sees a need for a change, nor if there hasn't been a legal change, it just sits there. I don't know, Tracy, again, if I'm answering your question, I feel like I'm not.
Well, I'm just, if the issue is, I guess the issue, I'm focusing on the issue. If the issue is we don't need to tie up our district clerk or any support staff with having to do redlining, I'm thinking if it's a board member or committee that's requesting a change or a possible alteration to the policy, then they would do the track changes, which Mr. Pineda said, which would create the redlining themselves. The district clerk would only do the redlining if it came from Erie 1 or, you know, some other legal place.
Ashley?
Yeah, what I was going to add is, yes, that will definitely cut down on some of the time, but it still is going to go to central admin. It's still going to go through the attorneys. They're still going to need to dedicate all that time to go through these policies. And given the fact that we have all of these that are backlogged, maybe the simpler solution, I like to try to keep things simple because when you get complicated, that's when things break down. So maybe a simple solution here is we create a folder on the Google Drive and committees can take those red line track changes, copies of policy amendments they'd like to make, pop them in that Google Drive and let admin and the district clerk and Ivy go through the list of policies that are pending, prioritizing again what they feel is urgent based on the legal. And they have all the suggested changes sitting in the Google Drive and they can get to them in whatever order they seem fit. And they can take it at that point, but at least we didn't lose the content and it's still somewhere. We all know it's there and it's on the list at some point. But I think we need to give them the time to go through those legal ones first, get through all that. And then after they get through that wave, they're going to look at the remainder and the recommendations. And they may determine, hey, maybe it's one of the committee ones that's more urgent. And they'll say, okay, let's move this one along. Or they may turn around and say, hey, it's one of these other policies that's more important at this point. But that would be my suggestion, to try to keep it as simple as possible.
Who's the they in your?
Well, we just mentioned a few minutes ago that Dr. Iverson, the district clerk, and Ivy as well would be looking at these and figuring out, hey, which ones are legally required and determining priority based on that, right? So I think if we leave that decision point to them, they already know what they're doing. They can churn through the legal stuff, get that in as soon as possible, get that to board for review. And then after that, they can make a determination based on what's left as to what's priority and what's not. But as long as we have the policy recommendations from the committees in a parking lot somewhere that we all have access to, we'll ensure we don't forget about it. What's happened in the past a lot of times is we kind of talk about it in passing and then it's really not stored anywhere per se. And, you know, things get busy and we all kind of forget about it. So maybe that's a simple way to address that.
So if we create a shared drive, okay.
The priority one. The Ivy's going to identify and then we will look at them and even prioritize those based on law and what's required now, get those updated first and go from there. And I think if the committees get involved and look at them, they should maybe, my process of thinking about it is they look at it after we've looked at it. And if that's something, once we get it, we get the markup, we mark it up, we look at it, we do maybe I'm not clear, are the committees looking at the regulations and providing feedback, or are they looking at the policy?
The policy.
Okay.
Well, that's my answer. Does anyone else have a different answer?
Did you mean
No,
policy or? Sorry, turn this off.
Policy.
So instead of committees, so maybe we need to make clear to all the committees that when they want to look at a policy, we're going to put it in a queue for admin to review first. They can read through it and start making comments on their own so that when it comes back to them, then they can make those suggestions if they haven't already been made by admin and legal. Is that what I'm hearing, everyone?
That's one way to do it. I mean, it's really a preference. So if the superintendent wants to do it that way, that's fine with me.
Sounds like, Dr. Iverson, that's what you'd like to do. That is what the flow chart kind of says, Ivy.
And I just want to point out that the board does not committee members who are not board members. They do not have access, but board members do have access to the draft policy section. So you were talking about creating a drive where everyone can see it. Those can be seen, but just by board members at this point.
So maybe the only thing we'd need to add there is if you're going to make a list, because that snapshot you shared is not, what's in there is just the ones that have actually been actioned, right?
The ones that are currently in there are the ones that have been redlined. Right.
So if there's, in addition to that, a document that's just a list of things that we know need to be changed at some point. And then after you and Dr. Iverson have sat down to prioritize them by legal, et cetera, if that could be added to that draft, it's a suggestion. It's a place for everyone to see what's on the table.
It's easy enough to put in the queue what ones have come up, not necessarily that it's been redlined at that point, but everyone will see which ones have come up by everyone. That's easy enough to do.
Yep. Okay. Just so if, for example, I wanted to pull out student records access and challenge. Okay, that's already in there, but I would know that as I'm reading this, just for fun, as I do, that maybe there's changes on the way that'll be going through the process. Okay.
Chris,
okay.
So you read the policies for fun.
And I can't sleep late at night. All right, have we beaten this topic to death? Has any questions that have come up recently been addressed? Are we clear on what our next steps are?
I'm good.
Yep. Okay. All right, let's zoom out of there. And then, okay, I left that with guest in there. We'll take that out later. Okay, then the next topic on the agenda was the upcoming budget newsletter. I don't know, again, I think maybe the format and all that has been settled, but I don't know if there were any outstanding questions that we needed this committee to address as far as what's included regarding the budget vote or the election. Is there clarity on what's being included in the newsletter?
I'll read to you what was shared with me by our district PR person. Let's see, budget newsletter. Sorry. So we're going to have, she shared the layout with me. It is going to be a smaller newsletter than we've had in the past, but it is going to have the full Spanish speaking translation, which is awesome. We will have a meet the candidate section. And it looks like it might be a smaller section than before because we will also have, it sounds like, QR codes to link back to maybe more detailed information. So although the newsletter will be shorter in length. It will be accessible. A longer, I guess, explanation for things will be available in the QR code, which will be great.
Ashley?
Question on the QR code piece. That's linking back to GCSD's website or external websites?
It says the QR code for the newsletter will link back to the budget section of the website where we can expand upon articles whenever, necessary.
Perfect. Thank you.
So will the budget newsletter only include that one legal portion, which is basically a graph, or will there be room for, I forget how many pages you said this would, but I know that our space is limited now. Will there be room for exposition on the budget, or will it just be that diagram? I'm afraid not everyone will have access or know how to click through a QR code to more information. And I just want to make sure there's.
I don't know legally what, so we'll have, of course, usually the board president and superintendent address the public. We'll have the budget overview in there, voting details in there, the budget notice. Is that what you're referencing?
No, if you're able to explain what we're doing and highlight the changes we're making and show how we're under the cap, and so that there's some explanation of the numbers instead of just the.
There's this expenditure review charts, expenditure and revenue charts. There's tax levy information on there. That's what you want in?
Yeah, I just know the legal part is a very, it's a very simple thing. So there's going to be room for you guys in your okay, to explain. And going back to Ashley's question about the QR codes linking to the budget section, when you're talking about the candidates thing, will that link back to there, or what is being included for candidates? And then that brings me back to Ivy and what's going to be in their packet so that it's done on time and we don't have a delay getting the newsletter out.
I'm not sure, Ivy, if you remember the past amount, but it says the candidate section may be kept to about 150 words per person. And I think that's a draft idea. So I'm not sure if it's going to be a 400. Do you remember, Ivy, how many there were before?
The concern for the timeliness of the newsletter, that's what brought about this agenda item, my understanding. What tends to delay the newsletter going out is the information received from the candidates. That explains, they answer 3 questions, you may not get it in a timely manner. And by the time the candidate nominating petitions are due, the board's adopting the budget the following day, you really have to turn it around to the, and get it to the printer so that it gets out within the specified period of time required by law. So I know that last year it did go to legal, and they advised that the information, the details, is really a candidate campaigning, and they should do that on their own. That the newsletter should just be, the picture, the name, the person's name, if they're incumbent or they'll be new, and kind of leave it at that, very simplistic, not the extra information that's there regarding a candidate.
So, my as far as that goes, I understand it from my point of view, as long as everyone has an equal opportunity and we're not showing favorites, then it probably it might pass muster. But as far as our space issues with the newsletter, what is the actual plan then? Are we including exposition? Are they part of this QR code linking for more details? Are they, Is it name, rank, and serial number? What's the plan right now from the?
According to the PR, it says that they're planning about 150 words. I did find an old email in the past, it was 200 words. So maybe they're cutting down the wordage allotment from 200 down to 150. I know last year there was some issue that came up, but this year it looks like 150, and if we need to expand, that can be, I guess, included in the QR codes as well. Is that what you're looking at?
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
So for all the reasons Ivy mentioned, it makes a lot of sense. I do agree with the sentiment that I would like to give the candidates a little area for them to put some information, but I totally get the logistics. Why wouldn't we consider, for example, just giving a separate QR code that just links to a candidate page? You can have all the candidates on that page with the little blurbs that they provided. If they provided one, great. If they didn't, that's on them. It's up to them. And then we trim that whole section out and just leave the picture, the name, and here's the QR code for all the candidates, and we're done. And that eliminates the timing with the printing and all that other stuff that's going on. Yeah, I'm mute.
So I wouldn't be in agreement with that. I think we have way too many people that don't use QR codes in our community. I would not want a bio or whatever, a brief bit of information. I think we have quite a bit of people that vote that don't watch our candidates night. And I just wouldn't want that. That would literally limit people who don't use QR codes or have there's people still with flip cell phones. I don't know how they make it because I need my smartphone, but there are people, and I would not be okay with that. I was involved last year in the issue that came up that involved the attorney, and although she made that recommendation, she was also very clear that the board can do what it chooses to do. They just cannot fund any campaigning. So someone can't say like, I'm for this and vote for me over you because of these things. But there were very specific questions that the candidates were asked. I don't have them on me now. Those were safe questions. It was the way that people were answering them last year that made it a legal issue. And I think the issue of the timing can easily be solved if, just like you said, if you don't get it in, then just your name and whether or not you're an incumbent is there. I mean, the board or the governance committee can recommend to the board even simpler questions than that are there. I don't have them again in front of me, but the questions, the way they were lined up, do give you option to elaborate. So maybe we need to make the questions a little bit more direct and simple. But as for me, I would not agree with just doing a QR, that QR thing. I think that's great for elaboration, but enough information needs to be in the hard copy for me. That's just my opinion on it.
So as Ivy alluded to, my concern was timing. As the person who was involved in an election last year, my experience was the deadline to turn in our nominating petition is, as Ivy said, the 18th this year. We vote on the budget on the 19th, and pretty much the next day or two, all that information has to get sent to the printer to have the newsletter sent out in time. And from my experience, I turned in my nominating petition, and the next day or that same evening, I got a request for that candidate information. I kind of knew to expect it, but I didn't know how short that deadline was. So it was a tough turnaround. My suggestion for the timing issue is partly to include that candidate info in the packet that is given to potential candidates so that they have it and they know it's due when you turn in your nominating petition. Or else. And I do like your idea, Tracy, of kind of, it sounds like that's a way to kind of meet this in the middle. I agree. Not everyone has access to QR codes or knows how to do it. But maybe simplifying those questions so it's not, 10 items or I forget what it was exactly, but there was a lot of room for exposition. And maybe we need to specify now 9 out of 10 if not everybody last year, had their own website where people could follow up for, maybe not a QR code, but at least a reference to a website, because even if someone doesn't know how to snap that, they could probably get on a computer. So I like the idea of looking at what those questions are to simplify that return, but I also want to get that to the candidates when they get their packets.
I don't want to link to external websites. I think that's a liability to us. So that's why I was asking about a single QR code that led to a candidate's page. If we don't want to do that, that's fine. But I would not put URLs to any external websites, because then it's out of our control at that point.
Okay, you're right, because I forgot that if we also put this online, we're actually linking through to it. That's what you're saying? Yeah. I was thinking of the paper version.
Put it online and we put URLs there, then that's a different game. We don't want to do that.
Can we put that info without creating a hyperlink?
We could.
Sorry.
Yeah, I just don't want to get into the business of us referencing external websites, because if someone sees that newsletter 2 years from now and they hit that website and something different is there, that's a whole nother challenge. So I just want to steer away from that.
I had forgotten. That's a fantastic point. I'd forgotten that we post that newsletter online as well. And if hyperlinks could create that liability issue. Yeah. So I feel like we don't have a conclusion, do we?
I'll take it back to Jackie Gordon. Right now we are, as you read, Trustee Maris just read the email. We were going to use the code. So, and it was going to link back to a Meet the Candidates link where you could click on it. You're saying, Trustee Maris, you don't think many will do that?
Oh, I must have misunderstood, because that's not what.
If I'm understanding, go ahead.
Hold on, I'm just look now. Budget newsletter. I thought she said, hold on, the candidate.
Wait a minute, I just lost it again.
QR code for both the budget and for candidates.
So, for example, Meet the Candidate section may be kept to about 150 words per person, but a larger article can be accessed through the QR code. So that sounds like to me, Meet the Candidate section will be in the printed, which is what I was, it says here on page 5, Meet the Candidate section. So there's a page, there's a available section for it in the, I just want to make sure we don't have things on the QR only. Am I saying that right? On the website only and not printed available, just because then that would significantly limit anyone who doesn't know how to do the QR thing. You have to do that through your smartphone. Can you do a QR through? Yeah.
You can do it through a computer with the camera, but aside from that, Tracy, if we wanted to, consider the fact that somehow someone out there may not know how to use a QR code, as long as it's a district URL and we control it, we can just put in the hyperlink there and someone can just literally get on their computer and type it. I don't know anyone that wants to type a URL, but that is an option if you can't use QR codes, right? So that's a compromise, but it just has to be a link that we own and we maintain, not anything outside of us. Which it would be. I'm presuming this QR code is going to link back to our district site. It's going to be a page somewhere that is the budget and a page somewhere that says Meet the Candidates. So that's fine. That's one way to resolve that.
I like the typing. I like the typing of the thing, but I could be wrong. Okay, I've actually pulled up. So what we need to do now is take a look at this candidate information, decide if it's included in the packets or not, and then answer the question you guys are talking about right now. I've pulled up my candidate profile thing from last year. It asks for what? A photo if you want, family, occupation, community involvement, why are you running, top 3 challenges of the district, how would you address them?
Personally, I think those are all perfect questions and they should stay the same. I would much rather follow what you mentioned earlier, Trustee Valley, which is the suggestion that we just ask for that up front when the candidate packet is handed out. That way folks have time to put it all together. And when they submit, it's either in or it's not. Oh, Ivy has her hand up.
Sorry, Ivy.
If I may, aside from last year or prior years, the request for this information has been included as part of the packet, and we were still getting the returns very late, or the length was much longer, exceeded the word count that was requested.
And I'll attest that that's a struggle. Some of these say one paragraph description. Some of these say one line description. Because the questions are great questions, but they leave a lot of room for exposition.
So that's where my other suggestion came in, that maybe we recommend different questions or more narrow questions that elicit a shorter response. I mean, that's the only other thing we could do.
Yeah, the reason I don't like that is because, you know, most of the folks that, at least in my experience, a lot of the folks that run, at some point it's going to be their first time running, and most folks probably won't know anything about them, right? So it's helpful to have that context so that you can, as a voter, you know, have some context and figure out your thoughts, right? You can make your own interpretation of the person. So that's why I would say leave that there. What I would say though is if the challenge is that we've given a deadline and the deadline is not met, or the challenge is also that too much information is being provided, maybe we just address that and we say in the packet, Ivy, to your point, other than last year, everything was done ahead of time. Maybe we just say in the packet, this information not provided by this date will not be included if it's not provided by this date. And if you give too much information, we are going to take the first 150 or whatever it is words, because the point is, at the end of the day, the burden's ending up falling on us when it's not our responsibility for all of that to be put together. It's each candidate's responsibility to do so. So I think as long as we have clear expectations delineated ahead of time, we can hold folks accountable for their own product.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I do think, though, that Trustee Pineda, we should look at the questions. I don't know if do you have just the questions, Trustee Vallon, that you can give us? Because I think some of them say, like, tell us about your, it's like, it's very general. And maybe if we had a more narrow way of asking the question, we could get, I guess it was left open-ended so that people can include what they want.
Yeah, well, it's just, okay, so I'll go through it again. I'm on the other computer and I don't have this here. Says if you'd like a photograph to accompany your profile, blah, blah, blah. Family. That's all it says, family, blank space. Spouse's name and, it does say spouse's name and how many children. Please note the schools your children attend.
I'm sorry, before in the beginning, doesn't it say bullet point or no? Because I feel like,
okay. Candidate information for newsletter. The district offers a unique opportunity for candidates to include information concerning their family, work skills, and goals as a prospective board member in the budget newsletter. If you wish to have your information included, please follow the format below. The information must be submitted in Microsoft Word via email to Public Relations Specialist, blah, 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 and is due no later than April 21, which last year was, I don't know, 2 days after the candidate packets were due, let's say. Okay, hold on. I shouldn't have looked at that. Sorry, I have too many things open.
Just a quick time check. It's 7:10.
Shoot. Okay. The maximum word count for this submission is 200 words. If you would like a photograph to accompany your profile, you must email it. Family, spouse's name and how many children. Please note the schools your children attend. Occupation, a one-line description of what you do for a living. Community involvement, one paragraph listing or describing your past involvement in school, district, or PTA activities. Why are you running? One paragraph summary of why you would like to serve on the Board of Education. You're already well over 150 words at this point. What are the top 3 challenges facing our school district? 3 bulleted points, please. How would you like to address those challenges? 1 paragraph description. Answering all of those, you can get just through community involvement and you're at 150 words.
Right, which is why I'm saying maybe if we make it more, so maybe if we say list 5, list 3 in bullet points, no more than 5, list your community involvement as opposed to a paragraph or something. Maybe if the direction is a little bit more specific, we can get it shorter answers. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm still struggling with this one. I still think you need all that data as a voter to decide how you feel about an individual. What we could do is if we're worried about space and worried about time and all that, we could just pick a particular few sections to put on the newsletter, and the rest let that be on the digital version and on the website. And if folks want to get more information, they can go and look at it there. That's another way to do it.
Yeah, like a sentence saying for more information about how these candidates.
Yeah, maybe pick the 3 bullet points, right? What's their 3 top issues affecting the school district in their view? Maybe that's on the newsletter, and maybe the quick bio about themselves, and leave the other stuff.
Yeah, that's my point. I would put in the newsletter their family, the top 3 issues that are important to them, and any community involvement. What else was there?
Occupation. Why are you running? How would you address those challenges?
I mean, why are you running can be more campaigning, as Ivy was referencing. That can get into more campaigning. Also, the public has an opportunity to meet the candidates, usually during the day of voting. There's like candidates row, number 1. Number 2, candidates are usually out in the community trying to meet people. And number 3, there is candidates night, usually hosted by the PTA council, at least the last, I don't know.
It's on the calendar from before.
So, I mean, I don't know if, I don't know how bad it would be to cut it down as a voter. Yeah, if you don't know these people you're looking for. And sometimes the budget newsletter is the only thing that people look at to make a decision about voting for the budget and candidates.
Yep.
It's a hard decision.
Yeah, and then candidates night, if you remember, most of the time you're answering a set of questions that have been prepared by the PTA, right? So you have a little spiel that you give, but the rest of it is you're answering questions. So you don't really get the sense of the person. So again, if we're worried about timelines, we just have to hold people accountable, but with expectations way ahead of time, so they have the ample enough time to put this stuff together. And then if we're worried about length of the newsletter, we can cut that down and maybe just put their 3 bullet points if that's a concern. If not, then I would say leave it the way it is with all the information they want to provide. But then going back to Ivy's point, if it's 150 characters or whatever the limit is and they go over, we could just tell them as part of the expectations, if you provide more than this, then the first 150 words is what's going to be used. Because again, the burden shouldn't be on our staff to try to make this work on their compressed timeline. And then there's always, these days, there's mailing delays. So there's so many other variables that we shouldn't have to be responsible for making happen. So that's just my opinion.
Okay, so far I'm hearing, does anyone have their hand raised? That our next steps are included in the candidate packet. Are we cutting the questions to family, top 3 issues and community involvement? And then for more info, what? We don't want their website and therefore a hyperlink.
It'd have to be a hyperlink back to our district page where you can have the full bio if that's what you want to do.
Is that, then it's on our district webpage.
If they have their own website, can't we type it in without a hyperlink? Just have the actual 1, 2, 3.
So if they have their own website, it goes back. It's the same. So whether you're typing it, you're clicking a hyperlink, or you're snapping a QR code, it's the same problem, which is once they are no longer on GCSD websites, we cannot control what's there. So today it could be, I am Bob.
I don't mean the link. So what am I trying to say? Just the words, but not, you can't click it. You can click it, nothing, you don't go anywhere. So
Yeah.
not a hyperlink, but.
I understand what you're saying, but my point is this. If the words say iambob.com and tomorrow they no longer have iambob.com and some other company or someone else acquires it and puts whatever random stuff they want to put on there, now we're the ones that issued the newsletter that had a reference to that. That I don't think is a good look for us. It's a liability. So that's what I'm saying. We shouldn't link to anything external at all. Whatever they want to, you know, put, whatever they give us in their packet that goes on the district website, it's vetted, it's there, it's on our site, it's safe, and we should not be linking to anything external, whether typed or not.
Okay, so is this a QR code or a link or whatever back to our district website, a different page on the website from the budget? Does it go to the voter information? Where does it go? Or is there room for 2 QR codes?
There's QR codes are small. There could be room for 2 QR codes, or it could just be all on one page. I think that's semantics. That's the minutia. I think once the person gets to our district website, if we had the button in the corner, if we just had it, keep scrolling, then I mean, either way is fine. I mean, I don't know if we need to spend a lot of time on that.
I personally just don't want it combined with the budget stuff. The budget stuff usually lives there for forever. And I'm imagining once the election is done, the candidate stuff would be wiped away, right?
Yeah, at some point, although we do keep the candidate's information and use it for the trustees page most of the time. But yeah, the point is, if we want to do that, that's fine. It could just be a button, a hyperlink on our on the budget page that says meet the candidates or whatever we want to do is fine. I mean, it's not, that's the easy part. The hard part is deciding what we're doing.
Okay. All right, and the last thing I want to say is you mentioned candidates night. Is there room in the letter from, I don't know if you guys are combining it or doing it separately. Can we mention the PTA Meet the Candidates Night as a place for more information in the newsletter? Yes, Ivy.
The Candidates Night is usually the first week in May, and that's when the newsletter would be released. So you might see it after the fact. Okay,
timing is not working there. Okay. All right. Have we covered all of our next steps for this so that not work? So it sounds like you guys are going to go back to Jackie and just confirm how we're doing this. How do we, so Ivy, as far as including this in the packet now and cutting down some of those questions, I don't know who does what, or if Dr. Tracy, I don't know if that's something you need to say to Joya, or if Dr. Iverson, that's something you need. I don't know who manages the candidate packet.
Dr. Iverson would have to, forgive me. As district clerk, I would get that information from the superintendent's office. The biographical setup. That's why it wasn't part of the candidate packet. The district clerk is the one that prepares the candidate packet and disseminates it. That's why it wasn't disseminated. Trustee Valley last year, I had not gotten it from the superintendent's office / PR person. So there was nothing for me to to disseminate at the time. That's why you received it late.
Okay.
So we would do that again this year. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I don't know if people are asking yet for the packets, but
I don't believe so.
Okay, so maybe we're just entering April now, so maybe sometime next week we can.
Yep.
Well, by then I'll have this in writing too. Okay, is everything addressed there? Are we moving on? Have I forgotten anything? 7:20, move on. Okay, board retreat, review and document suggestions and governance handbook. So we had a very good retreat. Also, in addition to the strategic plan discussion that was in public, we did some team building and identifying other issues. I don't know if we identified concrete next steps that we want to document or procedure changes that we want to document in our governance handbook. I'm just putting it on the agenda to jog our memories. I myself can't find the things I wrote down. So I'm hoping if there's something we need to be formalizing that we have some input here from the committee members. And if not, then this is a gentle reminder for us to consider what changes we discussed. Anyone?
My suggestion is, I know a few of us did take notes during the retreat. I would suggest that we just request board members that did take notes to submit them, potentially to the president. So I don't know if Trustee Mears, if you heard that whole thing, but the suggestion would be that the board members that did take notes during the retreat to submit them to you, so that we have an aggregated list, and then we can review them probably at the next meeting.
Well, okay, so I took notes. So you want everyone who took notes in executive session, or are you saying
retreat,
from the training?
Retreat only.
Okay, so the retreat had two sections, had an open session and a closed session, executive session. So the executive session had some board training in it, in which there were, at least for me, I took some notes on board training. I don't know if other people took notes. So you want them all to submit their notes to me for the training? Or
anything in mind, right? Yeah, anything that we discussed in our retreat portion that included team building and discussion around protocols and procedures around board governance. Anything that was suggested as something we can improve on that would be amended in our governance handbook or elsewhere if there's another place it would do, as far as how we manage the business of the board. Ashley, because there were other items that we discussed that might not fall directly under this committee. So those were the ones I was trying to focus on here. For example, this is not something that was specifically said, but let's say that it came up that we are required, right now we're required to submit agenda items 5 days before a meeting. Let's say we discussed, let's change that to 2 days. I mean, that's something that we discussed in the meeting and we'd want to document, so that's documented and that's something we would then begin acting on. That's an example of the things that I had in my mind. Ashley, am I covering? Tracy, am I answering your question or clarifying for you what we're looking for?
So are you going to send an email to the board trustees to ask them to send their notes to me, or should I send a basic email?
I will do what my board president says.
I mean, I can send an email, but do I just say send all of your notes, or only send your notes that involve any change in procedures?
The question we're discussing right now is changes in procedures and protocols that fall under this committee. Yes. Yeah.
So it's just that.
You're muted.
Oh, I'm sorry. I said, okay, thank you for the clarity.
So which of us is sending the email?
I'll do it right now.
Okay. All right. So, all right. Next, the authority to hold remote meetings is scheduled to fall by the wayside as of April 15th. We have no clarity as to whether that will actually happen or not. I've read various opinion pieces saying that they think it will not be extended anymore, but until it actually happens, I will not believe it. But we do need to have a discussion because we have a meeting next week, April 5th, and then our next regular meeting falls after that April 15th date. So we may need to bring up to the board at next Tuesday's meeting how they want to proceed after the 15th. Is there any recommendation
specific committee meetings, right? Is your question?
Correct, because currently we allow public attendance at work sessions, and we are required to attend personally board work sessions and board regular meetings and board special meetings. Correct. This is my query specifically to committee meetings.
So there's in my mind, there's a few implications to that, and I thought I saw it somewhere in your notes here. Maybe it's further down on the agenda. Maybe it's just I'm remembering something from a previous meeting. But we did have the conversation as to what are we going to do when this day does come. Are we going to still live stream them? Are we going to record them? How are we going to handle the logistics? And then there's implications to that, right? Right now, we have one individual from Southern Westchester BOCES helping us, live stream this meeting. If it's in person, it becomes a little bit of a different scenario, right? You need usually video equipment, and then there's the streaming on the YouTube channel, and it gets a little more complicated than this setup is a lot more easy and simple. So we have to kind of consider all that. Obviously, we won't have much of a choice if there is no extension. So we have to make, I guess the first decision is, will we still record these? Or do we want to just maybe record them and post them to the YouTube channel later? That's an option too. It doesn't have to be live streaming. And the live streaming, in my opinion, of a in-person event is where it gets complicated. So if we just had something, a little easier, like maybe what we did during our retreat, where it's just recorded and then it gets uploaded at some point in time later. If we're still allowing physical in-person access anyways, I mean, that's sufficient.
Yeah, I mean, I'm I'm all for in-person meetings, period. I think that they work much better. I mean, I would go so far as to say all meetings from the point forward should be in person, but I understand that that doesn't work for everyone. But just me individually, that's what I would prefer. I think it works better for communication purposes, relationship building, understanding one another, back to communication, free flow of information. This is much more restrictive, as well as although more people can watch it, it's just much more restrictive. So there's been a huge difference in relationship building and communication since we've been virtual. But if we don't have the choice, I am okay with filming. My only concern is who's going to be responsible for that. If there is a trustee within the group or an administrator within the group of the committee that's willing to take that on, great. But if it's a committee that does not have someone with a video camera, or that's willing to take responsibility for a video camera, then what do we do?
Dr. Iverson, did you have a comment? I thought I saw your.
No, I'm hearing Trustee Mayor's. Those are just questions that I don't have an answer to. I do think the virtual, this is for committee meetings. I think you get, I get your point, Trustee Maris, in terms of that in person. I know you get good participation when it's virtual because people can get their kids settled and then attend the meeting and not have to run out and get to the location. I mean, so it's a board decision. I know I'm kind of torn in terms of which way to go. But, with what we're getting support from BOCES right now, if the board does decide to, by this date to have all your committee meetings live streamed and YouTube like we do board meetings, I would think we can get support from BOCES. We would work to see if we can get support from BOCES to do that.
Mean support from BOCES to do it in person?
So
yes.
Let's break this into two parts then. Let's assume that the authority to hold remote meetings without inviting people to those remote locations falls by the wayside. So no, excuse me, that it's continued. We have the choice then. Do we continue holding remote committee meetings with all of the live streaming required for these board committees? District committees can be recorded or live streamed. Or do we decide as a group to just move everything in person? And then if we decide, if I'm making a flow chart in my head, if we decide to move everything in person, then the question is, do we record or not? So let's, if we break it down like that, if we're still able to hold remote meetings, do we want to continue as we are? Or do we want to move everything in person?
I would continue as we are. That's just me.
For me, I have to look at the purpose of our committees, the purpose of our meetings. There's primary and secondary purposes. I think filming, we do get greater participation. We get greater awareness in what we do, right? People all of a sudden can watch. I think that's a secondary purpose. And I think it's an important purpose for our district because we really need buy-in from our community in order to, of course, pass budgets, but also support our students. This district has a history of not necessarily kind of, waxing and waning the support. So I think we need support. So this is good. However, the primary purpose of these committees and of the board meetings in general, are to get work done. And so my experience, only myself, and I was here pre-COVID for a few years, and I've been here during COVID. I think much more work gets done in person. I think that is much more free-flowing of communication from both directions, whether it's the public to the board members that are there, the board members to the administrators to the public, to all members, and much free-flowing of information. I think, and maybe I'm just antiquated, because for me, hard copy documents and paper, I'm watching, for example, Monday, I watched a CEC meeting. I don't have that paper in front of me. So I'm subject to whatever gets put on the screen, and I'm watching. I can rewind, I pause it and look at what's on the screen, but I can't follow the meeting the same way as when I was a community member attending a CEC meeting in person, and I had papers I could look through. I was in the meeting, I could raise my hand and stop someone to clarify if they're going on about something and I'm lost. It's very different now. Now being on virtual, you cannot fully, in my experience, when you're watching at home, people used to put questions in the chat because you can't always participate the same way. But that's just, I was a parent who went in person for years. Then I'm a board member who had meetings in person for a few years before we went virtual. That's just my opinion. But the secondary gain of people buying into the school district, people seeing what we're doing, definitely is a gain. I just don't think the primary purpose of getting work done is better in person for me.
I would strongly disagree, but that's my opinion. Specifically because when you're in committee meetings and they're fully online, we are almost always sharing documents on the screen to ensure that everyone has access to them. I can think of pretty much every committee I'm in that does that. And every document that we're discussing is up on the screen. But that's just my opinion. Chair Vallon, what's your take?
I'm of two minds. I am starting to sense more and more the loss of in-person meetings, because you do miss out on some of that relationship building, whether it's that 3 minutes while you're waiting for someone to come into a meeting and you're getting to know that community member or that administrator. There's some of that that's missing with this format. And I think that those informal bonds are what really create a solid team, and that's just an aspect. However, it is so convenient to be able to throw dinner on the table, shut the door, and not have to, plan that extra 15, 20 minutes in case, you're hitting all the red lights to get up to the school building. You can't dismiss that. But like I said, for me now, that balance is starting to swing the other way for me. So I'm trying to think, maybe anticipating that next year we're probably all going to be in person. Who knows? Maybe they'll pass the law they keep talking about to enable this format. I don't know, but I'm wondering whether, basically, to follow the wisdom of Solomon, maybe we need to start with committees like this, the board committees, maybe start doing these in person, for example, because there's not a lot of public direct public involvement. Those meetings in person would of course be open to the public, but then those bigger district committees like CEC and the finance and facilities, where there's a lot more public participation actively in the meetings, maybe continue to have those remote. I guess I'm trying to have it both ways, as
that's a good middle ground
per usual. But I know that that's a hard sell, and I'm telling you, if we do go that route, it is so convenient to just be able to do this. But I also feel like some of these meetings might drag on longer than they should because we're at home in our comfortable environment. Maybe in person like speed things along. I don't know.
That's another thing. I feel like the meetings drag on longer online than they do in person, at least from my experience pre-COVID. The meetings were much more succinct when we were in person. That's another thing. Listen, what I'm saying is not popular, but I'm honest. It's just my personal experience with in-person in this district and online in this district. I know it's not a popular decision. I'm in my pajamas on the bottom right now, so I'm very comfortable. If I were in person, I would still be in my full work get up, and so I get it.
Dr. Iverson, what are your thoughts, or how do you anticipate your
well, I will tell you, I've talked to many of the principals, and although we can have meetings in person, many are still holding them virtual with parents. They said to me they're going to, this is not their meetings, it's not a committee meeting nor connected to the board, where there's a law that's out there that they must meet. They're saying their parents are telling them that they really like the remote structure because they can do the kinds of things we just already discussed. And especially say around parent conference day, when they had 2 or 3 kids in different buildings, they could have all 3 in one day by being in a living room, and they didn't have to travel to 3 schools. So, I think it's, half and half. It benefits some and it maybe not others. I do get a lot done virtually. I'm not seeing the difference. I find in person, we belabor more because people get up and use the restroom. There's sidebar conversations. I have not seen, I just don't have a preference. I like virtual, and I will do what the board decides if we go in person, but it's not as, I have not seen those concerns. I think there's always the element, if you're virtual, you're not in person, is not as personable, but it's worked for me. We are still using it in many ways, still right now in the district for many meetings, especially if we don't have a facility where we can be, and even give people that option to spread out and to continue to govern their own safety and own comfortability around being in person. We just don't have facilities that lend itself to that, where everyone has. So the virtual still works for us. So people aren't driving out. The principals stay in their buildings. They meet with me virtually. Those probably were in person years ago. And we get a lot done. So I hear both sides. You all have a tough decision to make.
I feel like we're not going to have a consensus here tonight to make an official recommendation to the board. I don't know, but I think we do need to have this on the agenda as a discussion for Tuesday, though, because it might change.
Well, I think the issue so if it changes, the changes are different. If it changes, then there's not any further of a discussion. I also,
except for the videotaping part or the live streaming part, that discussion.
Live streaming, yeah. Like I said, it's not a popular decision. I'm sure, a majority of the board would probably want to remain online. So I don't think that's the question. It's more of, if it's taken away from us,
okay, what
are we going to do? Like, are we going to continue, who's responsible again? Who's responsible for the videotaping?
Right. So that was the second half of the question then. Okay. So question 1, if we remain with remote ability, do we remain as is, or do we put it to the full board on Tuesday what they want to do if it's status quo? I'm asking an agenda planning question Tracy?
I'm sorry. You said, do we put it to the
If the law stays as it is, do we put it to the full board on Tuesday, whether we go in person, or do we just remain?
If you're requesting that, I would honor that. I can tell you, I could probably count that we would have at least 5 trustees that would want to remain virtual.
Okay, so then we leave that question to the side.
I wouldn't, just from my own conversations with trustees, I hear a superintendent wants to.
I'm asking you, you're the one who talks with everyone.
Yeah, I just wouldn't do it. But if it's taking away, I shared my personal opinion, even though I think my opinion's in the minority on the board, but that's my individual opinion. But if it's taken away from us, I think we do need to plan for that. Otherwise, we'll be scrambling and trying to figure out what to do.
Then the question too is, if it's taken away from us, I think we do need to put to the board on Tuesday. If we have to go in person, do we tape or live stream? And if so, which kind of meetings? So I think tonight we should have a recommendation to present to the board if we can come to one among us. Any thoughts? Ashley?
So I will tell you, from professional and personal experience, when you have a meeting that is live streamed and it's an in-person meeting, which I would call hybrid, I guess is the appropriate term for that. Mm-hmm. The audience that's watching that meeting typically loses a lot of the meeting, because what ends up happening, we are creatures of habit. We're going to be staring at each other across the table, and we will gravitate to what we're used to. I'm going to be looking at you, talking to you. I'm going to forget there's even a camera there. So if we wanted to do that, we would have to, in my opinion, we would just be doing either we're recording the meeting with a stationary camera, or we are live streaming it via the YouTube channel. But I think there's something to be said for the dynamics of an in-person meeting being recorded versus broadcast. So I would just say, if we're going to do that, then I would say let's live stream it. But there's a resource cost to that. So we just have to approve the resource cost, whatever that may be.
Tracy, Dr. Iverson?
Yeah. I think if we remain virtual, I would see this remaining live streaming like we're doing right now. The videotaping, that's something I would check to see if we have the capacity to even do that. I know BOCES can support live streaming if we remain that way, or if we are in person. They're doing it now, so we can possibly continue with this, just be in person. If we live stream, I don't.
Tracy?
I would support taping it and not live streaming, just so that we don't have to use the manpower. And maybe we only use the manpower when we absolutely have to, like if one of the trustees can't do it or doesn't know, doesn't have responsibility for the taping. But set the requirement at videotaping. Live stream is like a bonus. That's something.
All right.
I would recommend that whatever we do, we make it standard. If we don't follow a standardized method, it's going to be confusing for everyone, including the committee members. So I would say we do it one way, or we do it the other way. The other thing is to consider the board meetings that we hold now are in the auditorium, and we have equipment there set up permanently. We have everything set up for that. If we decided we wanted to do this, and committee meetings are typically much smaller, we used to at one point sometimes use the TV studio as one of the alternate locations for our committee meetings, because it was a smaller space and equipment's there as well. When we didn't have meetings in one of those 2 locations, it did get a little weird because the other spaces we have in the building aren't really set up for that. So if we were talking about recording, I would not be recording in a room that's not one of those 2 that has the equipment already. So that's another consideration.
So recording. So you're saying there's more support for taping and not live streaming.
No, what I'm saying is whatever you're doing, it has to be, in my opinion, either in the auditorium that we already have the equipment set up for, or in the TV studio. Because what I would not think is a good idea is for someone to be porting around, moving around the equipment, especially if they're not meant to do this kind of stuff, right? It's easy for one of us to hit the record button on something that's already set up and then press it again when it's done recording. Not so much to do the setup and all that configuration. Something could go wrong there.
So when we talk about that, then I'm going to go back to not recording, which is not a popular decision, because I can think of, for example, the CEC committee, the finance committee, audit committee. We used to meet in all sorts of places, right? The mansion was open. When the mansion was closed, we met in like the what do you call it?
Sometimes during the school day when students
during
are
the school day, in the small, you might meet in the business office, you might meet in a small
little
theater. We've met with the CEC committee, we traveled buildings, right? So parents and community members wanted to see our buildings. So we would hold one CEC meeting in Leaf Jackson one month, another at Highview. So inevitably, it's not always in the auditorium or the TV studio. So if we're gonna tape or use equipment, we're locking ourselves into locations.
Or we're providing the means to the district, and we're requesting the superintendent to supply budget for that. And we're having our staff do it. And that's the other way to go. But that's an expenditure, right? That's an additional expenditure. What I do want to make sure I stress is I don't want to lose the fact that we have our community at this point. We have more participation from them watching these meetings than we've ever had. I don't want to lose that. So that's where I'm torn, where I don't want to lose the fact that if we don't record it and we don't live stream, that gets lost in the sauce, because now you're relying on a community member to physically be there in person. And we know that for a lot of the parents of school-age children, that's not going to happen.
Do you see any difference between the board committees and the district committees? Or are we, yes, Ivy.
I just to make you aware, so the district committees are not subject to open meetings law. So if you wanted to continue holding those remote, that's fine. And actually, you don't even have to live stream. That requirement is based on holding remote meetings that are subject to open meetings law. So those are different caveats for district committees, because you have more non-board members sitting on those committees than you have board members.
Right.
The only requirement that you have, and it's based on board policy, not open meetings law, is that you have to have minutes for your committees, your district committees.
Thank you. I would probably argue, even though we don't need to live stream those meetings, those are probably the most popular meetings to watch. I haven't done an analysis, so those are the ones I'd want to, if I were making a suggestion and delineating, I'd want to record those at least.
You said, okay, so you said, I'm sorry to interrupt you. You said which ones? Hold on, let me just open the list.
The district meetings, which right now are the finance and facilities and the CEC committee. There's an outstanding question about education and wellness, which we'll have sorted out by July, hopefully.
So only those two can stay online. It's irrelevant. It's the others, the audit, governance and policy, governmental relations, and safety and technology. That would have to come offline if they say. Yeah, it's tough.
And those are the ones I would say, again, without doing an analysis, that are probably the least viewed. Not that I'm trying to, again, unpopular opinion, not that I'm trying to balance district resources and transparency, but and also just a consideration of how to get more people actually in the conversation in the room.
Yeah, but I'm gonna go back to primary and secondary.
Thank you.
Purposes.
Yes.
Transparency means it has to be a public, Carol explained this to me, it has to be a public meeting, meaning held in a public place where anyone can join. It does not mean that it has to be videotaped or live streamed. So it's not that the meeting is not transparent. However, the secondary gain of the public participation, viewing, feeling like, you know, they have more access because it's not in a in-person place that maybe is difficult for them to get to, not even difficult, that's the wrong word, but inconvenient for them to get to due to family obligations or any work obligations. Videotape, they can watch it anytime, you know, middle of the night, early in the morning, whatever, while driving, they can listen to the meeting if they play it on their phone and in the car or something. So we're reducing ease of access, I guess is the term, but it's still, I just don't want to be, I want to be clear that it would still be transparent. It would still be in person and it would still be accessible.
Yeah, I guess my thought process is the cat's out of the bag, right? We've been doing this for 2 years now. So people are already used to it, regardless of whether it's required or not, transparent or not. That's my sentiment, that folks in the community are going to be like, look, you've been doing it for 2 years. We've gotten used to it. It's a convenient method to have the engagement where they're, to your point, Tracy, are at least hearing what's going on. I don't see how anybody would say, hey, we don't want that at this point, other than the only consideration for my brain is cost.
Yeah.
And implementation. So that's why I'm like, if I don't see a way to get around it. I think we need to continue the practice.
If staffing levels and costs are a problem,
well, for me, it's not just staffing levels and costs, just so you know. I know I'm in the minority. I'm not pretending I'm not, but I'm being very clear here. I'm sure people hate me when they're paying attention, but I'm being honest. There is also the taped factor. People and trustees, staff, people are different when they're taped. And so there is a difference. There's a big difference in communication. There's a big difference in participation. I went to all of these meetings as a parent before I was on the board. I went to the meetings when I was on the board pre-COVID, before we had to tape everything. Sorry. And there is a difference in what people say because they know it's taped and it's memorialized forever. And so we've been online and we've been taped, so we may be a little bit more ourselves, but participation is slightly different. I'm sorry, the dog is barking.
So where do we end up?
So right now I'm thinking if we are required to go in person, I would probably recommend that since the FinFac and CEC committees are district committees with public participation, I would probably recommend that they continue staying virtual through June and we readjust in July, and ideally they're live next year. And that those meetings be recorded or live streamed.
Live stream. Mm-hmm.
And then if we are required to go live, that the board committees, the audit, governance, governmental relations, safety and technology, that they would have to meet in person. And then if, geez, I would not want to live stream them. At most, I'd want to record them, but I do. Tracy's bringing up how that's true. It's true. People may be less honest when they know, or less. Yes, I believe communication has changed when you're being taped. So, oh goodness. So what would I recommend?
I'm sorry,
I
Ashley.
probably want to do a clean break. Let's record the rest of this year and then start fresh with new procedures next year and possibly not record those board committees, especially if we have staffing issues. Not a popular opinion, but that's what I'll go with.
I had to step away, so I didn't see. I'm sorry. Ashley, you want to continue taping? Did you say live streaming or no?
No, I think we were just recapping where we ended up, and Chris was giving us her summary of what she thinks she would do.
This is my, if I were recommending, but I haven't, I jumped in line and went first. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. No, I thought I missed maybe where we were. Okay, sorry.
So Tracy, you're going to give your...
Oh, I would say take it all offline, but that's not going to win. Sorry.
Okay, so it sounds like Chris wants to keep it going through the end of the school year, then stop. Tracy, you would want to stop it now. And I would do the exact opposite. I would keep it going. So I guess we're in the middle. Dr. Iverson, what would you?
I would keep it going. I would keep going like we are now.
So you'd record all of the committee meetings, even though, okay, so live and recorded. Okay, so I'm going to recap what I heard.
Virtual right now. I mean, if we have to not go virtual, continue. And I would have them all right there in the auditorium. It's just so I hear you move them around. I would make it convenient and, you know, and keep them right there on the stage for committee and, you know, or in that area, so that just make it as easy as possible. And I don't know the difference, and I know transparency is an issue, and it's always something we want people to be that way. I think live streaming transparency is just a concern as recording, because you can always go back and it doesn't change the transparency is what I'm thinking, whether you record or live stream. Transparency is transparency. And where people are and vote and talk and from their hearts can be recorded and played back, and or you can watch it live stream and hear it as well. I don't know if it changes that.
You know, I would totally agree that whether it's live streamed or recorded, you're going to get the same person in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
But I will tell you that people had changed. I can think of 1, 2 people right off the top of my head, probably more if I had some time, that are very different recorded. There are people who 100% diehard support this school district, but they will not be, I don't hear them be honest since we started taping about certain things. And they say, like, I don't want to put anything negative out there. They may have an issue that they want to correct, but they don't want to say it on film. They don't want to have something memorialized. They may want to make a comment about a particular thing, but not have it follow them. Like I said, I can think just off the top of my head. And I've seen them in meetings that I'm watching. I'm like, this is a different type of presentation.
Back in the day, back before COVID, people would go to the work session and have discussions that we didn't, you know, people didn't necessarily want to air all the dirty laundry, but they wanted something addressed.
And our work sessions were not taped. So, and I was one that would do that before I got on the board. I would go to the work session in the mansion and bring something up to the board members, because I know it's not taped. I know the notes are very general. It doesn't have my specific comment in it. And I didn't want to be on camera, you know, make my statement to the whole community. I just wanted to talk directly to the superintendent and board. And so people, I think, do that, especially the CEC. They show up, they talk, they used to talk to the board members at the CEC, or whatever staff would show up, and that was it. It was, you know, David would make his notes, but it wasn't like verbatim and who said what in that way.
It becomes less speech making and more of a conversation, and at least it can read as more sincere. And I don't mean to be pegging, now that we're all being watched, I don't mean to be painting everyone with the same brush, but that's part of, you know, you're elaborating on part of the dynamic change we've seen. So I definitely think in July, you know, if this were July and we're making a clean break from board year to board year, I would say next year we need to have some meetings, and maybe not that are live and not recorded.
And so the way, I think it was NISBA, I'm not sure if it's NISBA or WISBA, but the way they talked about it in one of the trainings I went to was that it inhibits the process. Because there's a camera, because there is this live documentation about it, it inhibits, you're more concerned about your presentation, you know, than going through the true process of whatever the discussion is. And so that might not be important to people, but for me, it's important. So that's why I waited that way. But I will move a little bit to the middle where Chris is, and I will say that we will continue to tape at least. I'm sorry, Trustee Renata, you asked me to keep it continuous. So I would say tape, not live stream. Tape at least until June 30th.
So let me just recap. If we are allowed to stay virtual, we're going to continue as is, broadcasting and virtual. If we need to go live, the board and district committees would still meet virtually and still record until June?
No. If we need to go live, the board committees,
all right,
the district committees would stay virtual, and both would still record through the end of June.
Okay, and that's what I had written down. I just didn't say. So would they live stream or record?
I say live stream for all of it, but listen, I have a very different opinion from most on this meeting, so that's okay.
No, I actually think you have the majority opinion of the board, just from the people that I've spoken to. I don't think that I think if the full board were voting, they would definitely leave it online. Probably definitely live stream too. So,
all right,
not
so
against
live stream as a preference pending staff availability. And if, just like this past weekend, if they're not available, we'd record it. We'd figure out a way to record it. Okay, so we'll need to make that recommendation to the board on Tuesday if things change between the 5th and the 19th. So do I hear a motion to make this recommendation?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion.
We've had enough.
Okay. Recommendation passes. Okay, it's way past 8. I think we need to, if unless someone wants to go over something we didn't mention, I think we need to abbreviate this. Well, we're not abbreviating the meeting, but abbreviate the agenda and pick up where we left off for next time. Any comments? Let me just find. Yep.
Are there any topics on this agenda that we need to subject Ivy to stay on this meeting with us, or is she free to go?
At this point, we're probably ending. No, I don't. Well, no, because I think we're adjourning, aren't we? We were going to look at the wellness, the two pieces of the wellness, but again, that's probably not going to. That could probably wait 2 weeks. And we were going to start looking at the calendar of agenda items that's in our governance handbook. But we can do, that would be the bulk of our meeting in April. So no, Ivy, I am so sorry. Unless there's anything new. Sorry. So Ashley, we can either adjourn or say goodbye to Ivy and move forward.
I would vote, let's say goodbye to Ivy so she can get some rest. And I would vote that we move forward with a subset of topics, because obviously we're not going to be here all night.
Okay. All right.
Well, thank you for having me. Have a good night.
Thank you, Ivy.
Bye,
Sorry.
Ivy.
Bye.
Did you have a particular subset of topics in mind, Mr. Pineda? We don't have to go over here. Yeah.
We've talked about this enough. We've killed this dead horse at this point a few times, but something just popped into my head about the meetings in person, which is physical layout. So most of the committee meetings, as I recall them, and Trustee Maris, keep me honest, they typically were like around the table and we kind of face each other face to face, versus our board meetings. Right now, we're all in a panel, right? So I'm just thinking logistically, recording that, you're not going to see our faces. You're going to see backs of people. You're going to see all that. So maybe we don't necessarily have to solve that here if we think it's going to go too long, but just something to consider maybe when we're discussing it with the board, just to get some input on what makes sense. In my mind, it would change the committee meeting a little bit, but maybe it would make more sense to go into that panel format. And we'll just have to crank our necks, I guess, sideways to talk to each other. But I don't see another way to do that.
I like it kind of how, I looked at the video from the retreat I think that's how it would be. I think people being around the table, when you're a committee, you're talking to one another. Again, that's the process. It's free flowing communication both ways. And the taping is really for the convenience of the people who couldn't make the meeting to be able to watch later or to hear the information. And, you know, it's not going to be ideal. I don't love our board meetings having to, you know, look back and forth, but you know,
Yeah.
we're in service to the community. So that's why it's like that. But if someone takes the time to come out of their house and come to a meeting, I don't think they should have to be subject to like that panel dais situation, but that's just me.
Yeah, I'm going to say the camera comes second. The committee's there to do some work and have a discussion with each other, and it's not a stage. And I don't mind having my back to it, but that's completely secondary to me. If it's impinging on that conversation flow and that face to face and that body language and that free flow of communication, it's not important. It's having that discussion which comes to a result or a problem solved or suggestion made. So, but you might find that 5 other people think otherwise. I mean, if we were in a U, I mean, last time we were in the U and we had a speaker, you could just put the camera at the other end of the U, for example, and see other people, see most faces.
Maybe that's the suggestion.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking right now of the television studio. Now, the television studio with all the repairs done, I haven't been in there in a couple of years. I don't know. I don't even know if they still have those tables in there. So we'd have to look at all those logistics.
It's been renovated. It's very nice. So.
Mm-hmm. Do they have like do they still have the circle of tables in there, or okay?
And remember, we used to bring those tables in, so those are portable tables. It's not like they're fixed or anything. So yeah, we could have them set up. I think the U makes a lot of sense. I think that, hey, we solved one tonight. That's the recommendation.
Okay, a U at the TV. So it sounds like we're appropriating Mr. Lewis's space. No. Sorry in advance, Mr. Lewis.
The TV studio or the auditorium, it could still be a U, right?
Yeah. All right. Okay. Anything else you wanted to bring up tonight? It's 8:09.
No, I'm good for tonight. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to assume everyone's good with ending this meeting. So I'm just going to state for the record, since this is being recorded, I did send out a heads up to the committee members that I have an issue with our scheduled meeting next Thursday due to a little mini milestone in my family. So we're going to reschedule our next Governance and Policy Committee meeting from April 7th to April 21st. You each got back saying April 21st worked out. So I'll send that official request to Joya to have that posted on the district website. So next meeting, we'll take up wellness and our calendar items. And before then, I will talk to our legal advisors to see what we can show publicly or not. That's another wrinkle with doing this in a taped manner. There's things we can't necessarily broadcast. So saying that, is there a motion to adjourn the meeting at 8:10?
Just one clarification. As of now, the plan is that meeting on the 21st would be virtual unless the law changes, and then we would be in person. So I guess when Joya posts it on the website, we're crossing our fingers it's virtual, but she may need to change it to in person.
Exactly, yes.
And if it's in person, are we doing it at the auditorium?
Steve's room.
I'm sorry, Dr. I?
And if it's in person, we'll be in Steve's shop.
Agreed.
Oh, we'll be in the TV studio?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
In a U shape.
Right.
With the camera at the other end.
I still haven't heard a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions. Okay, meeting adjourned at 8:11. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. We can end the live stream and
Will do.
go to our happy homes 2 feet away.
Good night, everyone.